A lot can happen in a week. Some of it good, some of it bad, some of it downright ugly. When faced with intriguing developments in the week's news, we turn to a rotating panel of non-experts to parse the good, the bad, and the ugly of it all. On today's panel, Charles Kuffner, who writes the off-the-cuff political blog, Raul Ramos, associate professor of history at the University of Houston, and Vivian Ho, health economist at Rice University and Baylor College of Medicine. Charles, Raul, Vivian, welcome to Houston Matters.
Hey, Craig.
Thank you for having me.
Panel, Houston Mayor John Whitmire Wednesday announced an independent panel will investigate why the Houston Police Department suspended more than 260,000 cases since 2016, including property crimes and physical and sexual assaults. According to a code Houston Police Chief Troy Finner says he's once again told officers not to use, they were suspended due to a lack of law enforcement personnel. Mayor Whitmire says he trusts and believes Chief Finner is doing the best he can with an internal department investigation, but as we heard on Thursday's Houston Matters, Whitmire says it's an unacceptable code that, quote, we need to get to the bottom of, and that both he and Chief Finner will be held accountable. Finner says he welcomes and supports the third-party review. Mayor Whitmire wants an independent panel to look into HPD officers using a code the police chief says he told them not to use in order to halt 260,000 plus investigations over 8 years, claiming a lack of personnel. Is this good, bad, or ugly? Vivian.
Ooh, definitely ugly. This number, 260,000, I was wondering, I'm thinking, what are the chances one of us is one of those? It's those people. It is just mind-boggling that this has happened to so many cases. It's extremely upsetting. Part of me wants to say, well, what is the police force doing if they're not taking care of these cases? But then it's like we look and the jails or prisons are completely overflowing. It's unconscionable. I don't know how it went for so long without anyone pointing this out. And then beyond that, just the idea of this independent commission, I don't know if they're going to be able to solve the problem. I feel as though this is playing whack-a-mole with our city. I know that crime is one of the greatest worries. Certainly the voters have said so. That's what I hear about. Everybody says the crime is out of control. I certainly feel it's that way. It's Houston. I feel I'm a lot less safe than I was when I first arrived in this city 20 years ago. And then when you look at the statistics, the Houston Chronicle has written about this, that the number of police per capita has been steadily declining for years and years. So, can we think bigger picture that we've got this revenue cap in terms of our taxation, so that can we have a discussion about how many police does it really take to make a city run well? And also, how many teachers does it, it's like Mike Miles sort of rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic, but we are underpaying in terms of our taxes. So that's why I think it's ugly, because just one panel is not going to do a darn thing.
Despite that, we turn to this panel and ask you to talk about it. Good, bad, or ugly, Charles Kuffner?
I mean, it's good that there's going to be a review, but I agree that the situation overall is ugly. I mean, I can believe that there has been issues with insufficient personnel to deal with, all the reports that come in to HPD. I can also believe that HPD has not done the best possible job of oversight of its officers or of prioritization of the things that it does pursue. And I would hope that one thing that this commission report can shine a light on is what HPD does with its resources and its time. Because there is a world in which they spend a lot of time and a lot of resources doing stuff that's not really doing anyone any good. And there's a world in which they are doing their best with limited resources, and it's just not enough. I don't know which world we're living in. I tend to think it's more the former than the latter, but I could be wrong. I don't know. And that's my point. We don't know. We don't know to a large degree what their actual solve rates are on crimes. I mean, they're asking for more resources, more money, for more officers on the streets. How good are they at actually resolving the crimes now? And what's the plan to improve that? Convince me that the new officers you're going to hire are going to be put towards things like better crime prevention and also more detectives solving the crimes that have been committed. Houston Landing did a story a few months ago about a constable deputy who's a whiz at solving bike crimes. And one of the cases they illustrated in this story was one in which, the woman whose bike had been stolen wasn't able to get HPD to respond to her. They wouldn't take her report. So the constable, this constable's deputy, who kind of does it old school, was able to solve it. And it's like, so what are we doing over there? My frustration is I don't know what they're doing. I don't think we know what they're doing. I would like to know more about that because I don't know what to make of their claims from the beginning here.
Okay, good, bad, or ugly. Raul?
Well, ugly, obviously. I think this is really raising a big issue that is something of a third rail in urban politics. It certainly has been since the George Floyd protests, which is accountability. Accountability is I was trying to count, 14-letter word. And anytime that comes up, particularly around law enforcement, it all of a sudden becomes an issue that you're anti-law enforcement, you're anti-cop. And this is the next big moment for a new mayor, and Mayor Whitmire is staking out his position, trying to sound outraged. We've been hearing a lot of outrage in city council meetings, and he's, it seems to me, attempting to communicate what he feels is the popular sentiment of outrage by those victims whose cases go unresolved. And when we're talking about this number of cases, it's a large percentage of the population, and folks want resolution. And this is an incredibly large part of our city budget. We just heard that 5% budget cuts across the board, except for police and fire. So when we're talking about, well, what else is left after police and fire, that takes up 2/3 of the budget. And so we're already in a budget limited environment. And if we are spending that significant percent of our resources, we need accountability. We need transparency. So to me, it's not as much a question of having this board, but who will be on that board. The people on that board are going to be in charge of building trust and rebuilding the trust that's been lost. In this particular incident, we had the forensic office incident from about 5 years ago. This is the latest in what you see, which is the lack of accountability leading to almost a decade of mismanagement.
Panel, the Texas Parks and Wildlife Commission Monday voted unanimously to approve a land swap that gives 43 acres of state park land to SpaceX in return for nearly 500 acres of privately owned land. While the net acreage gained sounds good, some opponents say the Boca Chica State Park land being given up is sensitive land for shorebirds, while the land SpaceX is offering is not. The agency delayed a vote on it in January after receiving more than 1,000 written public comments opposing the swap. As Texas Public Radio's Gage Davila reported Monday, Rio Grande Valley residents pleaded with commissioners for almost 4 hours to vote the deal down. The swap is still subject to environmental assessment from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. The State Parks Department approves a land swap with SpaceX. The commission thinks is a no-brainer, but some residents and environmentalists argue is a bad deal. Is this good, bad, or ugly, Charles?
Honestly, I don't know. And I know that as a certified non-expert, that shouldn't stop me from having an opinion, but this is one of those times where it does. I respect the fact that a lot of the locals had strongly negative opinions about it, and I think that should be taken very seriously. But it could also just be, we don't like change. On the surface, the idea of trading 43 acres for 477 seems like a pretty good idea, although there's quantity and quality in there. And I don't know enough to say whether this is a good deal or not. I would like to know more about why they're making these complaints. I would hope that the environmental review that this has to undergo, if it shows things that are bad, that this gives us the opportunity to say, okay, it was seemed like a good idea at the time, but let's walk away. But yeah, I don't know. I really don't.
Raul.
Well, here comes accountability again. The thing I see is a tension around the privatization of the development of research and development around space flight. Look, we're in Houston. This is now historically tied to our region, to the way people think about Houston and the Gulf Coast. And so we ideally should be supportive of that, keeping in mind the needs of the local community. In this particular situation, local representatives are not representing their constituents. There's seems to be a shine to rubbing elbows with Elon Musk and feeling that kind of energy on the one hand. On the other hand, I watched Oppenheimer over break, and every time I see something around SpaceX, I keep thinking about these hidden research laboratories and nefarious technology that's being developed, and no oversight, no accountability. No, at least when the federal agency NASA was running these projects, certainly there were subcontractors, right? Boeing was a big subcontractor. You had other subcontractors. But now that it's moving totally into the private sector, we have very little accountability to, as not just taxpayers, but as the people who have to live around this, to see where this is all going. And I'd like to see a little bit more, I hate to use another bad word, regulation, but at least oversight in this process.
Yeah, I mean, if anyone wanted to use the Elon factor as a tiebreaker in the no direction, I would certainly understand that. For what it's worth, I mean, the Cameron County judge initially opposed this on the grounds that the Texas Parks and Wildlife Division hadn't done some procedural thing in a timely fashion, and then they did the thing, and then he said, "Okay, fine, I'm fine with it." So I don't know. I mean, you can look at that however you want.
Vivian.
I agree with Charles and Raul. This is ugly. There's not enough information. I am not at all an environmental expert, but I am an economist, so I believe in cost-benefit analyses. And there's not enough data to do the calculations in this case. And my understanding is it's not just the issue of the bird sanctuary. It's that SpaceX has not told anyone what they want to do with the extra land. So how do we know what it is they want to do with it? Not only that, there are residents, I guess they're Native Americans, and they've been using this land for 20,000 years. Some of it is sacred. So there's that additional issue, and there's others who are completely unhappy about the rocket launches. And it's kind of like, yeah, when like big giant concrete things just go, kaboom and come landing in your backyard, that I wouldn't want that to happen to me either. And so here we are, we're talking about this multi-billion-dollar company, and they haven't even compensated this community for damages, which sound significant, and then you're just going to let them have an additional. And did you look at the piece of land that they were giving them? It was just kind of like this, what is it, this brush, and it looked like in the middle of nowhere. Now someone's going to say, yes, there's some sort of very fragile lizard or toad that lives there, and we've got to worry about that. But still, it's like, it just sounds like a bad deal to me.
I don't think 43 acres would be enough to build Elon Musk a supervillain lair. So, I mean, I don't know what he has in mind for it, but it's probably not that. Probably.
Maybe a small hollowed-out volcano.
Yeah, I mean,
I could see that.
Yeah, maybe.
$1 million.
Well, all right, if we're going to go full Austin Powers now. Charles Kovner writes the off-the-cuff political blog. Raul Ramos is an associate professor of history at the University of Houston. And Vivian Ho is a health economist at Rice University and Baylor College of Medicine. Charles, Raul, Vivian, thank you very much.
Thanks,
Thank you, Craig.